Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories nationally, locally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists, Chike Ogea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Professor Bola Akinterewa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. We begin in Nigeria, gentlemen, where the government has reduced its visa fees for Americans traveling to Nigeria. The announcement of visa fee reduction on Wednesday came a day after the United States announced increases in its visa fees for Nigerians as a way of retaliating Nigeria's high fees. The U.S. State Department had said the visa fees were increased after 18 months of consultation with the Nigerian government to make its visa fees for Americans proportional failed. Nigerians who do not understand what informed the U.S. action had typically felt that the increase was unjustified until the Minister of Interior, Rauf Aregbesola, admitted that a downward review of the visa fees charged to Americans by Nigeria had been approved months ago, but could not be implemented due to the transition process. The U.S. Embassy was quoted as saying that its new fees will remain in force as the federal government's reduction has not been communicated to it. Hopefully, the government will realize early enough that the issuance of a press statement is not the same as officially communicating with the right authorities concerned on any matter. Well, Chike, let me start with you before I go to Professor Akinterewa, who is a diplomat.
Exactly.
I mean, what is all this about? 18 months of negotiation with the Americans, and the Nigerian government, the Ministry of Interior, did nothing until, the Americans, following up on Rule 9, Order 9, the executive order that was given in 2017 by President Donald Trump on visa rules. And then they decided to apply the principle of reciprocity.
That's right.
Why did we have to wait for so long? And since the Minister of Interior gave that instruction that we should revert, we should reduce, cut off the $110 extra that we were charging the Americans, why has this not been communicated? A story that made the front page of almost every newspaper.
Well, your guess is certainly as good as mine. But the truth is that, you see, it's just that the Americans, they have a functional system. Because I can assure you that the main reason why we even have to charge these prices for our visas for Americans is because our embassies everywhere are poorly funded. So I can just guess, sitting here in Lagos, that mostly these visa fees what our embassies need to run the whole embassy, because I don't think they get any kind of subvention. But be that as it may, that is our own, part of the issues we have to deal with in-house. To compound it, you just said it, 18 whole months, and these negotiations were going on, and we could not communicate to them. There are official channels for this kind of communication, diplomatic official channels. It's not about somebody sitting down in Aso Villa or somewhere and releasing a press statement that the Americans are going to take judicial notice that that kind of issue has been resolved. So you see, each time we do this kind of power, diplomatic ones, it's not good for the image of the country at all.
This was how Nigeria, again, mismanaged its contract with Process and Industrial Development, PNID. Let's just hope that it's not going to take another 18 months.
And guess what?
Before the American embassy will be duly notified.
And then the damage is done, and we sit in-house and we start passing the buck. The people before, look at what I'm hearing. The new minister now says it is a transition process. If there's a transition process, there's always a government. There's never a vacuum in governance. There's always a government. That's why we have the civil service. That permanent secretary in that ministry should know what to do by now. And this kind of thing, there is absolutely no reason for this kind of thing.
Well, Prof, what are your thoughts on reciprocity? Because I guess, It's not just the Section 9 of the visa validity rules in the executive order by President Trump that this is all about. It must be a big principle in international relations. And then what is the nature of official diplomatic communication that the Americans are talking about? And why is it so difficult, for Nigeria to communicate, a reversal in terms of a policy?
Many ways of looking at your observation. The first way is to first of all agree with Chike that every diplomatic mission, especially in light of paucity of funds, they need to generate some funds in their host countries. But they wouldn't be able to do that one without having the sanction, the approval of the Home Office. So when Minister of Finance is unable to, make the diplomatic mission solvent, our missions try to find ways of still succeeding. The second way is to look at the concept of reciprocity itself. It has two pillars. Reciprocity as a retortion. Reciprocity as a reprisal. As a retortion, it simply means that you are reacting without going to the extent of use of force. You engage in diplomatic practices, right? But when you talk about reprisal, this time you go beyond, diplomatic engagements to the use of force. It's just like the movement from crisis to conflict in polymology. Now, in terms of being a big policy, I can't agree more with you. You are right. It's a very big and important and, of course, an instrument for the conduct and management of international relations. You see, even though we talk about sovereign equality in international relations, we know that the equality is meaningless in the face of the more powerful countries. But one way of responding and containing the excesses of the big powers is the application of the principle of reciprocity in both ways, either as a retortion or reprisal. Now what is happening is that, why 18 months may not mean much for me is simply because if you want to spy the structure, the activities, the engagements of the Minister of Foreign Affairs as are today, there isn't much to write home about. Why? Cross-posting of people from other ministries to the foreign ministry is really a problem. People with mechanical knowledge, quote and unquote, medical knowledge, quote and unquote, now will be placed, will be required to do diplomatic notes, to write, to explicate diplomatic messages. I am saying that, look, even though a medical doctor can be a diplomat, he may not necessarily end up a good diplomatist. A diplomatist combines the knowledge of a diplomat with intellectual attitudinal disposition. They combine that. You can just imagine how you bring a permanent secretary from either Ministry of Water Resources or Environment to the Foreign Ministry. Please, we don't know where this is done in any part of the world. People who accede to the highest level, all right, in the diplomatic structure, these are people that have been well groomed.
But Prof, with this specific problem that we have with the Americans, what is the way forward? Do you see the Nigerian government communicating the position that it has taken promptly after wasting almost a week? And do you see the Americans, again, on the basis of the principle of reciprocity, reversing themselves?
Let me ask you one question, first of all, before answering your own question. The question is this: why will a government which is expected to understand the mechanisms of diplomacy. Why would it be happy to issue a statement and not communicating through a not verbal to the Washingtonian authorities? That's to let you know that, look, diplomacy doesn't mean much to many of the ministers and all these people making...
Or maybe they don't even understand it.
I do not want to put it that way.
You know, the Minister of Interior, he said he didn't quite understand the assignment that he has been given. So maybe this is a learning process for him.
And more importantly, Prof, please, because you made a valid point that I just want to talk to. You see, there are some specialized ministries, and I agree with Prof, from my experience in government. Foreign affairs is one. Budget and planning is another one. Those ministries, I think the kind of civil servants that should be there should be trained, purposely fitted for those ministries.
Yeah,
and this general rotation, no, this general rotation they do shouldn't be the case.
That's even for the foreign service officers.
Yes.
Those who have sagacious diplomatic minds, that is, those members of the Association of Retired Career Ambassadors of Nigeria.
Yes.
They are not made use of. They are not consulted. They are not listening to them.
And there's a pool of experience there.
And you see, the bitter truth in terms of diplomacy is this. The ordinary meaning, all right, of many of the words used.
Well, Prof, hold your thoughts. Let's take a short commercial break. And then when we come back, we'll just spend a few more minutes on this subject. Don't go away. We'll be right back. It's still This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Yes, Prof and Chike Ogea. Before we went on break, we were talking about this visa matter between Nigeria and the United States. And I had asked you whether you see the Americans changing their mind very soon. And the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nigeria doing what they're supposed to do, to communicate officially to the Americans before we can even expect any reaction from them.
Yes, I was on the point of not verbal being the instrument of communication between and amongst diplomatic missions and the governments. In this case, I was trying to make the point that our own minister cannot be contented with issuance of any statement. The ideal thing is to do a not-verbal, all right, and send it appropriately. It wouldn't take even 24 hours, all right? U.S. diplomatic mission is here in Nigeria, and you send that one. The moment it is communicated to the government of the United States through its diplomatic mission in Nigeria, it wouldn't take a maximum of 1 week. By the time the U.S. will normally revert to, to the principle of equity, which the Washington authority is actually asking for. So in terms of revisiting their policy, yes, they will. The moment we readjust, what the U.S. is asking for is not much of a big deal. It's only asking for fairness. That, look, we charge you $160 for the production of, for the processing of the U.S. visa. Processing is different. Production of the visa itself is another. Other charges, making inquiries to find out whether you are eligible.
Well, let's hope that the matter would be resolved. But let us also note that, the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria, in line again with Section 8 of the visa validity rules that I quoted earlier in the executive order issued by President Trump in 2017. They've also stopped this interview waiver for visa, applicants, what is otherwise known as a Dropbox.
Yes.
So we're seeing a lot of measures consistent also with immigration policies under President Trump. And of course, we are also aware that Nigerians account for the largest number of, immigrants who overstay their visas
I think
in
that
the
is the
United
main
States.
criteria,
So
yes.
I think that all of this,
that is the criteria
could be on the table
yes.
in terms of
unlike,
negotiation.
Unlike what people were thinking, that it was about all those boys that were doing fraud and all that.
No, it's overstayed.
lately.
Many
Yeah.
Nigerians tend to
It's more of the
overstay.
overstay. That's
Anyway,
right.
let's take another subject of interest. A Nigerian journalist, Agba Jalingo, who has been in police detention for over a week over a report about an alleged diversion of 500 million by the Cross River governor, has been charged with treason. Mr. Jalingo, the publisher of Cross River Watch, a Cross River state-based newspaper, was arrested and detained over a petition by the government's own microfinance bank following the report in its newspaper. Mr. Jalingo's newspaper has relentlessly criticized Ben Ayade, the state governor. The journalist, who was arrested in Lagos and driven to Calabar, the capital city of the Cross River State, had sued the police over his arrest and detention, which he said were illegal and a breach of his fundamental human rights. He's asking the court to order the police to pay him 150 million naira as damages for the manner he was allegedly maltreated. But while a judge is yet to hear Mr. Jalingo's fundamental human rights case, the police have instituted a 4-count charge of treasonable felony, terrorism, cultism, and the disturbance of public peace on the journalist. The charges also indicated that Mr. Jalingo was working with the Revolution Now movement of the detained publisher of Sahara Reporters, Omoyele Sowore, to destabilize the government and undemocratically force the government of Mr. Ayade to end through violent means. And that's quite strong there, quite heavy there. I mean, how does criticizing government or making, an alleged false accusation amount to treasonable felony, terrorism, cultism, disturbance of public peace? The police, do they even understand the law at all?
That is the problem. And, without, maybe we should assume this matter is now sub judice, and without preempting the courts, I would think that any judge, worth his salt, will certainly throw this away because there are so many issues here. But I think the major issue is the rule of law. What do we want to do with the rule of law in Nigeria? Because I thank God that the government in Cross River is actually a PDP government. So in the larger scheme of things, there won't be this blanket accusation all the time that I don't see how revolution now comes into the matter at all. Because if anything, we are made to believe revolution now is talking about ousting the federal government. This is a sub-national government, which is, like I said, headed by an opposition party governor. I really don't understand a lot of the issues that are going on now.
Are we not seeing a trend,
yes,
of assault on press freedom?
Yes, certainly.
Consistently, particularly at the state government levels.
Not just press freedom.
Many of these, state governors, they don't want to be criticized.
In
any way you criticize them, they just lock you up.
Before
there is the case of a guy called Daddy Yatta, right?
Yes.
Nobody knows where he is. There was another fellow who spent months and months after months, in detention,
yes,
just because he expressed an opinion.
And you see, Ruben, aside the press freedom thing, I think this, again, is an assault on rule of law, which is what we will have to head, because there cannot be any form of democracy without rule of law. I keep emphasizing that all the time. So when we do these things, when we give these tabs to the judiciary, the ultimate casualty is the rule of law.
Well, Prof, I mean, when a journalist publishes falsehood, or, defames a person, the remedy available in law is for you to go to court and sue for libel or sue for defamation. But to jump from libel and defamation to treasonable felony,
not even that,
that's quite a high jump.
The state really has no business in this. Like you rightly said, you that have been defamed or you have been, this libelous or seditious material has been printed against you, you are the one that should go and sue. It is not the state.
Anyway, Prof, what do you think?
I pity President Muhammadu Buhari.
No, this is a Cross River State matter.
I say I pity, very sincerely, the man. The reason is that his international image is continually being bastardized and tainted, because when you look at the nature of the charge, you will discover that at best is very ridiculous. Ridiculous because, first of all, the allegation is that he criticized the government. Either rightly or wrongly, the fundamental issue at stake is criticism, which is not outlawed. Now, even where the journalist might have defamed, you rightly pointed out, the law is clear on this. You can go to court, all right, sue him, let him prove his case beyond reasonable doubt. And let the court...
That's even a second stage.
Now,
you first ask him to retract the publication and maybe offer an apology, failing which,
of course,
you will take a legal action.
You
just jump from that.
You give him a time span, a notice.
I've taken that for granted that, look, you know, order and counter-order will always amount to disorder. His own order is the criticism. The counter-order is that of the governor, all right? And the situational outcome there is the disorderly case, which Mishike has called abuse of the rule of law. You see, why I pity the president is that he's surrounded by APC, PDP, all manner of governors who have opted to take laws into their hand. They interpret the law for themselves. They are not the court. And now, for instance, he was arrested in Lagos, transported by road to Calabar, according to press reports.
Yeah.
Now he has been in detention for 4 or 5 days. Whereas the law says, look, within 48 hours, you are supposed to have charged. You have not done so. Now, the policemen will now come into the picture, and you are talking about treasonable felony. But without giving the indices, the environmental conditioning of that. So the issue now is that the Nigerian policeman will just come and then charge you for whatever he thinks he should charge you without any raison d'etre. You see, if I have sympathy for him, is that he does not have control over them. The international community is monitoring us on a daily basis. Our own manner, respect for rule of law in this country, honestly, is bizarre.
And you know, Prof, the funny thing about this is that, okay, when this kind of abuses go on, many institutions, using your word, are bastardized. Another casualty of this kind of behavior is the police institution. Because really and really speaking, you see, when it suits us, we say our federation is jaundiced. It's not this. The governors are upset. We take one line charge from Abuja. That's not how it should be. We can't give command to the police. We are chief security officers of our state, but we don't have control of the police. We all know the police takes its directives from the Inspector General of Police. But in situations like this, how come the police is now taking a directive from the governor?
Chike,
so
please,
you see, when we do it's
have you read
ping-pong.
the report of former U.S. ambassador to Nigeria, Ambassador Lehman?
Okay, yes, I think I read.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I read it.
Please.
Yes.
Now, the submission of his report in the U.S. is that Nigeria has become at best irrelevant. All the things we purport to be or to have, they are at best irrelevant, particularly to the strategic calculations of U.S.
international
community.
The world powers.
So you see now, America is saying, look, respect for rule of law. All right? They are talking about good governance. Now, how will somebody just sleep conveniently?
I think the point that needs to be made is that the criticism of government is not a crime. I think Olataura JCA said that much.
Yes.
In is it in one course case?
Yes.
But here in Nigeria,
Femi Falana refer to that particular place and many others. Yes.
So and in other African countries, many of our leaders think criticism is a crime. But we'll take another short break. When we return, the conversation will continue. You're still watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Now joining us is Professor Anthony Akila. You're welcome to today's edition of the Sunday Talk Show.
Thank you very much.
Yes, good to see you. Yeah. Now, the next topic, now that Anthony Killer is here, we use that to welcome you. Moving to the United Kingdom, where anger is growing following the news that Prime Minister Boris Johnson had asked the Queen to suspend Parliament just weeks before the Brexit deadline, and the Queen duly agreeing to his request. The British Prime Minister's decision came under fire in London and other cities where protesters took to the streets. The demonstrations were called ahead of what is expected to be a pitched debate in Parliament this week, as Johnson's opponents scrambled to try to pass legislation that will block him from carrying out Brexit on October 31 without an approved withdrawal agreement. The currency markets also felt the reverberations, with the pound dropping sharply against the US dollar and the euro. Two former Conservative Party hopefuls gave their opposing views on the idea of a no-deal Brexit. Deal or no? In the UK, there were protests, on the streets of London, Glasgow, York, Manchester, people calling Trump, calling Boris
the alter ego of Trump. You're right.
Trump puppet. Yes. Some saying shame on you, Boris Johnson. Yeah. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn sent a word of support, even though they were asking for him because he had given indication that he would join the protesters. But he was represented, and then there were other groups, Momentum, Students March for Change, and all of that. What's your take? Do you think that Boris Johnson is just bullying Parliament?
Well, and in addition to that, there's been a casualty already. William Young has resigned from as the whip. He sent the letter in just today, the sign of protest. What I think is Boris Johnson bullying his way. There are three things to look at. Boris Johnson is a man of theatre. He governs by the idea of theatric moves. He's first of all an entertainer. But we should be careful. He's not as light as we think. He's thinking of a legacy, and his models are people like Churchill, Pericles of Athens. He's a man of classics, contrary to what people think. He's actually very deep. He has a sense of history. I think he's taking a gamble. He's a gambler, and what he's thinking is that he's going to tie his whole political fortune to this move. And the way to do it is to bypass Parliament, be a popular hero, and do something big. He wants to be the next Churchill. That is Boris. He wants to be the next Winston Churchill.
Without Churchill's intellect and style.
Well, he has his intellect. I mean, he graduated with a 2-1, but from Oxford, he has some of his depth.
Yes.
But nobody has Churchill's style in our generation anymore. Yeah. But he wants to be the new one. So he wants to do something big. It's a big gamble. Now, what we fail to realize because of the bad things he's doing, that he went with an agenda. He's doing two things. He's pushing for his no-deal Brexit, because that's what he wants to do. And he thinks he's doing it based on the popular demand that won the referendum. But he's also ready for election. You see, what he really wants to do is he wants to bypass Parliament and on the populist agenda, win election. Because he's pumping money into the system. He's a conservative person, but he's spending more than Labour.
Do you think that he imagined coalition against him? Of Labour Party, of Rebel MPs, of the Plaid, of the Scottish National Party, and that goes to be able to stop him.
And that goes to the third part I said. We mentioned two parts. The third part now is the ability, because what he's doing with that, like all historic figures, let's not forget that Churchill created an opposition against him. There was a Stop Churchill coalition. Everybody was against him when he was insisting on war, and people saw him as a warmonger. This is what Boris Johnson is doing. The test now is to see if those coalitions can actually come together. If they come together, and he knows it's a gamble, if they come together, he will fall. Yes. But he's gambling that they cannot come together, because part of the frailty of the coalition is not to say that Corbyn wants to lead it. The alternative is to get a conservative, and people are thinking of Kenneth Clark.
But you see, as much as I want to agree with you, yes, I do not subscribe to the argument that Boris Johnson is a gambler. He's not. I would say he's a master strategist. Yes.
More tactics than strategy.
His tactical policies all go very well for the system.
Yes.
When you say now that he wants to take advantage of the factor of popularity of opposition to Brexit
yes,
without deal, I wouldn't agree with you. Now, go back to 1975. Go back to the first referendum.
They had, yes.
Now, hardly 2 years after the United Kingdom acceded, you know,
to this
EU phenomenon, the issue of whether the British should withdraw from the EU agenda was raised. Was raised. The second referendum, which was basically to reorganize the political parties and their attitude towards the European Union, most British, all right, still raised the issue of withdrawal. Now, the real second referendum on whether or not to continue with the European Union, majority still had their way that they should withdraw, on the basis of which the rule, Article 50, will be invoked, triggered. And yes, triggered, and the British will withdraw. The point I'm making here is that you have one school of thought, majority for now, asking for withdrawal. You have another school of thought, currently in the minority. There is nothing to suggest to us now yes, precisely. So what Boris Johnson, from his record, in fact, he's on record to have been pushing for Brexit. He's a good Brexiteer.
A hard
one.
Brexiteer.
Yes. So what Prime Minister May couldn't achieve, now efforts were made to ensure that Boris Johnson succeeded her in order to achieve, you know, the objective, the ultimate objective.
That Theresa May couldn't achieve.
Precisely. Now, in terms of tactics,
what is that ultimate objective?
to withdraw. To withdraw.
Without a deal?
No, that's not the issue. No, hold on.
Deal or no deal?
You see,
no, hold on.
That's
Please,
where I will come in. Okay.
No, you will come in.
Okay.
The issue is this.
Okay.
You have withdrawing, and you have withdrawing with or without condition.
Yes,
there are two levels of analysis.
Yes.
The issue is that the European Union has made it crystal clear that it's not readily disposed to renegotiating the conditions for
and the issue of the Irish backstop that has been raised by Boris Johnson is not on the table.
Consequently,
let me take Chike, Prof.
Yes, Prof, because for me, that is the key. You know, I also belong to the school of thought that Boris is a strategist. Definitely. He looks funny, and, you know, with his hair and the way he dresses and all, but, you know, eccentrics, that's how they operate. He's a very brilliant man. But I think where he will be caught in his own game is in the backstop. Because what's most likely going to happen is that he's moving to suspend the parliament, which I think he already has done, the prorogation, the one you talked about. And then what that will mean, like you rightly said, EU is not putting anything on the table. So you're going to have a situation where the UK gets out of Europe, yes, and then he will be faced with issues of there becoming a hard border between Ireland and Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and because Northern Ireland will remain in the EU.
But that's the point. That's the gamble.
So once that happens, Prof, I assure you, that's where he's going to have milk on his face.
But you see,
because the Irish will get mad with him.
But that is the gamble. His gamble is that he can push the accelerator so fast and so hard that other people will blink before him. You know, he's gambling that he can win the British public by being a hero that wins an election, and he can go to Europe and say, look at me, I am the new hero, talk to me. You see, there's another parallel thing. Okay. Towards the end of the 30s, moving towards the 40s, Winston Churchill, who became later the big friend of the USA, was not even well seen with the US. His relationship was hostile when he started with the US, and later he went to forge the special relationship. What Boris is counting on in history is to be the new version of that. The enemy of Europe, and then later the friend of Europe. Professor Akintola will testify that a lot of time in diplomacy, the negotiator is the one who fought first.
Yes.
You have to fight hard, then you now go and sit down.
So it's who blinks,
talk.
who blinks
it's
first.
Who blinks first.
Okay.
That is the gamble that Boris Johnson is taking.
Well, of course, another tactics that Boris Johnson is adopting is that he's already shifting the blame.
Absolutely.
To the Jeremy Corbyn and
exactly.
The
that is the point.
By saying, look, he could get a deal from Brussels, but he's not able to get a deal because of the conduct
of those people.
And
you know what he calls them? The doubters and saboteurs. They're not allowed to do.
Of course, the predominant thing is a climate of fear.
Of fear.
You know, that has descended on the United
There's
Kingdom.
a lot of Boris always involved.
That's why we say he's a
It reminds me of William Pitt the Younger as well.
Yes.
He's about 330
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister. About 330 years ago, who couldn't get confidence in Parliament? And you know what he did? He called himself the Prime Minister of Duty. The same way Boris Johnson comes and say, I am here to do what the British people voted for.
That's right.
Regardless of Parliament. So when he told William Pitt the Younger, you don't have confidence of Parliament, he said, I'm here on the duty of the king and country.
That's right.
And I'm above the Parliament.
Well, but of course, you know, to prorogue Parliament is standard parliamentary procedure.
Yes.
You know, usually in autumn and May, you know, and the last time we had this long period of suspension was in 1948. 1948.
Exactly.
So, but it's the circumstances that
and
have
there
made
comes in the
this one
tactician.
controversial.
That comes in the tactician. That he's using an established thing, now really tactics different from strategy. He's using the tactics of an established thing geared towards his own advantage so that they can't disturb him with debate and confrontation in Parliament, and he gets it through. And that's
well, Parliament will return, I think, on October 14.
Yes.
They will have been shut down for 23 days, and then you have the Queen's speech.
Then you have the Queen's
23 working days.
Yes.
And you see, but something beautiful needs to be said about this. He suggested
And when is the deadline, though? When is the EU?
October 31.
October 31.
Okay.
You see, he
so
suggested...
we don't have 2.5 weeks.
That will have been thrown into the dustbin of history.
Yes.
And it's very beautiful. Ruben Abati started by noting the protesters on the streets of London and elsewhere in the UK. Boris Johnson suggested the Queen suspend Parliament, and the Queen did. It's very beautiful to notice the political and indeed intellectual maturity of the British elite, politicians and observers.
Well,
because nobody
the Queen won't get involved in politics.
Exactly.
That's right.
But the thing is that nobody
we need
criticizes
to
the
take
Queen.
another break here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News Channel. Gentlemen, let's talk about Brazil and the Amazon fires. The far-right president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, unleashed a tirade of insults against the French President Macron in a continuing dispute over the worst fires in years in the Amazon region. Mr. Bolsonaro said he would not accept an offer of aid to fight the fires unless Mr. Macron withdrew remarks he took as insults. Mr. Bolsonaro's remarks come amid an increasingly personal confrontation with Mr. Macron over the fires that have sparked a global outcry and threatened to scrap a huge trade deal between the European Union and South American countries. U.S. President Donald Trump stepped up to defend Mr. Bolsonaro's response to the fires, tweeting on Tuesday that he was doing a great job and pledging full and complete U.S. support. Now, I mean, you know, Bolsonaro is called the Trump of the tropics. So understandably, you know, President Trump would support him. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, there's been, you know, a lot of insults back and forth with, you know, Bolsonaro, even criticizing President Macron's wife and Bolsonaro's son, who is due to be ambassador to the United States, referring to President Macron as an idiot. But is this clash between global sovereignty and national sovereignty, as Prof referred to it last week when we first talked about this subject, is it the issue or the fact that, you know, the largest tropical rainforest in the world, called the lungs of the planet, is threatened with implications for climate change and the survival of the global ecosystem? Chike, let me start with you.
Well, I think it's a combination of everything, and it's a pity that the politics of it is overshadowing the real substance of it, which, like you said, is climate change. And climate change is all over the world. Even in Nigeria, we begin to feel it here. We see the kind of floods that are ravaging us and all that. These are all issues. I mean, like they said, that forest has, I don't know, how many percent of the
Two-thirds
of the oxygen that we need.
25% of oxygen supply.
You know, and
Two-thirds of the Amazon forest in Brazil.
you know, and this has global implications. So it's beyond Bolsonaro, and I wonder why, you know, like you rightfully said, he's going so low to start abusing Macron and all that. You know, I don't think that is necessary. We should face the substance. And usually whenever there are those issues, when there are global issues and Trump takes your side, I'm immediately skeptical. I'm already like, you're very biased. I must say. It's already like you're on the wrong side of what you're doing. So I think he should knuckle down, accept the aid. Even the Swedes, I think, are upset as well, and they have withdrawn.
Germany is upset. Yes. Norway is upset. Yes. Finland is upset.
Yes, and they had already advanced some money.
The Finland finance minister, is advising that EU countries should stop importing Brazilian beef.
Yes, and you see, beyond all that, here you are. You have this disaster in your place. Yeah, I mean, it has global implications, like we said. Yeah, the national and global sovereignty we talked about. But yet they are coming to help you.
You know what it's called in diplomacy? The disdain of mendicants.
Prof, is this a case of disdain of the mendicants?
Exactly.
I do not know whether to agree with him or to disagree.
No, but I tell you what, Professor Akinteriwa, it is beggars have a choice.
No, you see, let us look at the problem differently. The Amazon, agreed, very oxygenated, representing 25% of global needs. But looking at it geopolitically.
Where is it?
Where is it located? It's not located territorially in Europe. It's not on the territory of France, Britain, Germany, all along. In terms of sovereignty over that Amazon, who has it? I'm simply drawing your attention
Chile,
to...
there are many of them.
I'm coming.
Yes, it's two-thirds of it.
Yes, not just Brazil.
I'm coming to that. The point I want to draw attention to is this.
I know.
You see,
but I don't
international law.
In relating with a sovereign state, please, it must be devoid of arrogance.
Yes, that's the key thing.
Okay?
Or a colonialist mentality,
Nigeria
as Bolsonaro claims.
Can be a very bad country. It can be a terra cognita of criminals, whatever. That's their perception. But we as Nigerians, please, you must talk to us with decency, with minimum respect. Especially that if the Amazon...
I demand maximum respect.
So if the Amazon were to be located in Nigeria, now,
that's the lawyer
and now you will now want to say, because you are giving me aid, then you will dictate the manner, you will insult me and do all those things. No, please, we must contest that. We as Nigerians can criticize Buhari. He's our president, we elected him. But I will not accept that any Dick and Harry can just come and criticize.
But we criticize Trump.
We can do so. You see, it depends on the type of criticism you are bringing about. For the Brazilian leader, he made it clear that, look, we are exercising our sovereignty. If you are now assisting us, agreed. But it should not be in a dictatorial manner.
Well, I think that point is well made.
The way people are addressing him. He's a president.
The bigger point is the survival of the planet. You have a 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, campaigning for
and pushing forward,
reduction in carbon emission, and then you have presidents who do not seem to understand the importance of the environment.
Discuss and negotiate, but without insinuating that you are superior to another sovereign state.
It is the diplomacy of the Trump era in which people tweet and insult each other. It's a consequence of Trumpism. There's no work in this country.
Okay, on that note, we'll have to call it a day today. And then next week, We'll continue with major issues locally, nationally, and from around the world. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.